Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of AACRAO's Credential Chats. We're really excited to be joined by two guests this week, both from James Madison University. We have Sarah MacDonald, who is the Associate Dean in the School of Professional and Continuing Education, as well as Nick Swartz, the Dean of JMU's School of Professional and Continuing Education. Sarah, Nick, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting us
Thank
to
you.
participate.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to be bringing a pretty unique perspective to anything we've had so far on Credential Chats, and so really kind of want to give you a chance to talk a lot more than I do. And maybe the first part that really excited to hear about is that you all are working on a ta campus-wide task force. And so, for a lot of us who are diving into task force work, what can you share about the task force work at James Madison University?
So I'll start at a high level. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to present. And I will say that Sarah and I really enjoyed, we sent a number of individuals from JMU to last year's Convergence conference. And what a unique model to bring the practitioners that are a part of AACRAO within the academic side of the house and join them together. I really appreciate that approach on behalf of James Madison University. So I'll start at a high level and I'll say what led to the work of the task force originally. I've been in the deanship role since May of this past year, and I served as interim dean of the unit 2 years prior to that, and I had served as the associate dean from 2017 until I became interim dean. And I had a number of charges, new initiatives that were brought to my attention during my very first year of serving as interim dean. And one of those was directly in response to, at the time, one of our now former president of the university, President John Alger, who's now at American University, one of his key strategic goals for the academic year of 2022 to 2023. And that goal was to meet the needs of the students and the Commonwealth of Virginia by expanding certificate and non-degree offerings. And so in speaking with the then provost of the institution, who left the institution at the close of this last academic year, and how to help implement that goal, because I was asked to serve as a champion of that goal, we recommended having a presentation in front of what we call academic council. And those are basically all of the direct reports to the senior vice president and provost of James Madison University, to then get their feedback on next steps in the micro-credentialing space. And so the idea then was formed to, let's do a task force like so many institutions. We're so popular of doing the task force work. But this one was one that I believe confidently that we had the absolute right people in the room. Our work of the task force concluded last year at the end of this last academic year. And one of the last things that our former provost did with our interim provost before her last day was basically signing off on the recommendations of the task force. So right now we're working on creating, thank you, I appreciate that. We're working on creating policy recommendation that will then be shared with the provost and then with academic council. So hopefully full implementation. That doesn't mean we're not already in the micro-credentialing space, but we have not had a framework or a guiding framework to help facilitate the work of micro-credentialing. So Sarah, anything that you want to add to that?
I'll just add the task force, which met for about a year and a half, chaired by Nick, was, I think, so incredibly successful. And I mean, a year and a half to wrap up the work of a task force on a really complicated topic is lightning speed in higher education, right? But I think the reason we were able to move so quickly is we had the right people around the table. We had the two of us from professional and continuing education, but then also we had folks from the registrar's office, from general education, our university studies and online strategy area, and then a number of faculty from different colleges, all with really different perspectives and interests in micro-credentials. And having that group of people come together and just have some really open and honest conversations, I think was transformative. And it's the reason that we were able to move so quickly to a set of recommendations that whole group could get behind. And then we had some pretty good staff support for that task force as well. from our own internal office, basically. And so the task force was really well set up from the very beginning with every reading, article, white paper, blog post, podcast that our folks could find on micro-credentials and what everyone else was doing. We had some really great examples from other institutions. Kennesaw State is one that comes to mind, who had some really great documentation out there that we were able to learn from and lean on a little bit as we did that work ourselves in our own institutional context, within our own institutional mission, you know, translating that to the JMU way of doing things. So I think that's what I would add about the task force.
Yeah, I could definitely plus one the work at Kennesaw State, and they've been so generous in publishing it in ways that
Sharing,
are
yeah.
not just for their learning community, but also very much take this kind of and use it for everybody else. And I think a lot of us are drawing inspiration ideas from it. When you say you got the right people on the task force committee, I also heard you at the very beginning, Nick, say that this was championed at the executive level, right? This was not senior leader. This is C-suite basically, right? That are leading this,
Yep.
and that it was student centered. That there was this was not a whimsical thing. Here is this very student centered need that we need to be figuring out how we at JMU are going to be addressing it. And so how instrumental was that, or was it about mandates or communication in order to get the right people to not just be invited, but to actually make the time to show up?
It's such a good question, and I will say that our approach to micro-credentialing was not, I want to be careful with my words here, because that might come across in the way that I don't mean for it to be. It was not student-centric. It was, did we want to offer micro-credentials to our current students? And if so, the question was, is it in the non-credit space or the credit space? Because to stand anything up on the credit side of the house requires, depending on what it is, may require state level approval. And that's a really lengthy process. And oftentimes in the micro-credentialing space, it's about what's hot and in demand right now, tied to employer needs and wants. And so we made the decision that if we were to do anything in the micro-credentialing space, that it was going to be in the non-credit space for now. And that we did, it will be student-centric. I just had a meeting, and this is getting to your big question. I just had a meeting last week with our Vice President of Student Affairs, who is genuinely interested in partnering with our School of Professional and Continuing Education now that he knows more about our portfolio. And he's extremely interested in what we could offer in partnership with Student Affairs in the micro-credentialing space. So adding badges, adding certifications to JMU existing students, he's thinking probably seniors who they're realizing, oh my gosh, if I'm not going to graduate school, I start the job market, and yeah, I'm really good at what I'm being trained to do, but I need to also know all of these other things that really aren't credit bearing. It's about how to be a good employee. It's about leadership. It's about project management. That yes, there are all kinds of credit bearing opportunities for them in that space. But the whole purpose, of course, for micro-credentialing is that it's short and it's condensed, right? And that you're getting those small, tangible pieces of information that are going to help you be a better employee. So having this be a key goal of the institution, plus, and I want to remind myself the language, so I just pulled up a document, so apologies that I'm reading. Our provost, with her strategic plan, goal 3, objective 2 of the academic affairs strategic plan, and I made reference to this almost every single meeting. So then that showed, it reminded them that not only is this a presidential initiative, but it's also tied to the vice president, senior vice president, and provost of the institution, a goal that we're trying to accomplish as a division of academic affairs. So that specific charge was about continuing to develop JMU's online capacity, presence, and expertise as a priority for our division. And the goal continues because we had just made the transition to become an R2 institution. And so reminding everybody that charge as well, as we were still trying to figure out things coming out of the pandemic and how we could become more responsive, that was extremely helpful. I also think having a dean colleague of mine, she's the dean of the College of Science and Math, she was on the task force as well, that it showed the level of importance that the provost saw and that another dean saw. And I was at, I forget what conference it was. I think it was APLU with this particular dean. And we were in a micro-credentialing session. And so this was 3 years ago now. I'm in this session and she taps me on the back. She was sitting right behind me. And she said, I finally get micro-credentials and sign me up. And so a dean of the College of Science and Math wanting to partner with the interim dean of the School of Professional and Continuing Education to think about creative ways that we could help serve her students. And so fast forward to the end of this last academic year, and she now has a new badge for excellence in undergraduate research that is verified by her as dean because she did not want to put the burden on her faculty, but that then shows her faculty how important this is for her as a dean. And so, yeah, so I don't know if you want to add anything to that about the right people, but I'm quite confident that the task force, our work was as fast as it was and as great as it was because you had presidential, provost, and then deans who were leading basically the charge.
Dina, one quick follow-up question on that, if either of you have more thoughts on it, is, that yes, you moved at lightning speed, and the next step is, advance these recommendations to then, sometime that's a lot longer from now than tomorrow, do something about it. Is I hear you saying that having this buy-in and engagement at senior levels also can influence strategy and leadership such that people are looking in the mirror and saying, how might I use my leadership position in order to strategically lead while we're waiting for these more broad university plans to come out? And so, like, any kind of just thoughts off the top of your head around how, lessons others can learn from that?
And the other thing that I would say is that if your micro-credentialing, if that offers an alternative revenue source, use those words. Because as institutions are facing extreme enrollment challenges, JMU is not right now. Our enrollments are through the roof. But we also know that enrollment cliff, that we may experience some enrollment challenges like institutions across the country are experiencing. And so our former president, our interim president, our provost, all of the vice presidents of the university are continuing to think about identifying alternative revenue streams. And so if the micro-credential produces a revenue stream, then I think that is another reason why we were very successful in quickly getting things through, because we want the policy in place to begin offering so then we can scale our operations.
And if you are at an institution that wants to think about alternative revenue sources and you haven't yet talked to your continuing education folks, like us, maybe called something different on your campus, I strongly suggest having a conversation with them, because that might be the perfect opportunity for partnership that just hasn't arisen before. And this is what continuing ed folks like us are trained to do.
Yep.
And Sarah, you've actually thought about this pretty, strategically, specific to budget and finance. Do you want to just briefly share in our last minute around the templates that you've created to help people think through some of those considerations?
Really, really quickly. Part of the couple of transitions that our School of Professional and Continuing Education has been going through the last couple of years, Nick mentioned he was interim dean for 2 years and now is, we call it permanent dean, is a complete reexamination of our entire financial model for everything that we do. We support a lot of academic credit, online, off-campus degree and certificate programs. And we completely revamped that financial model, the entire budget template that drives those. And then having spent 2 years investing a lot of energy and resources and brain power in recreating a whole new way of thinking about and principles around that credit financial model when we wrapped up the work of the Micro-Credential task force and decided that at the moment, JMU is only going to pursue non-credit micro-credentials. We said, okay, do we need a new financial model for that? And we said, no. We just spent 2 years redeveloping a really, really good, smart, thoughtful, credit-based financial model. Let's use that. Let's adapt it as we need to, because credit and non-credit are different. But using that to drive the work of the non-credit micro-credentials that are coming for JMU, I think is the right place to start for us.
Yeah, I really love just some of these high level takeaways of this, as new and shiny as this is, we don't always have to reinvent the wheel. Some of the right answers
Right.
we've already have. They're just folded under a different tagline. And also I think, Nick, your point of using the words that are going to connect with others' urgency is a really great way for them to adopt their urgency that we're really hoping and needing for them to have.
Yeah. Yeah, because I assure you that the president or chancellor, however your institutions are structured, I assure you that they're having regular conversations about identifying alternative revenue sources, because we will all most likely be facing enrollment challenges in the very near future.
Well, that is just such a great place to end. Sarah, Nick, thank you so much for joining us on AACRAO's Credential Chats to share the really cool work happening at James Madison University. And have a badge-worthy week, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.